Yes, hello, I'm back. This is my second video in 2 weeks, so we're off to a good start. Hopefully this time maybe we'll get 16 people to watch it. Anyway, thank you for joining me. So this is a video in a series that I'm going to call So I Finally Beat, where I clear a game that's been sitting on my backlog for a little bit. The game that I completed, in fact, just last night, so this is reasonably fresh. Has not been on my backlog for too long, probably since about October, I would say. The game itself only came out in September, so it's still a relatively new game. And I'm keeping you all in suspense. I'm sure from the big background that you've got behind me, you've figured out what that game is, but it is The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. Now, I am a huge fan of the Legend of Zelda series, have played, I would say, 80% of the games in the series, or the mainline games at least. In fact, I have a little challenge to try and complete every mainline game. There's still a few outstanding, so I was really pleased to be able to tick this one off the list. Now, this is a little bit of a shorter, more condensed experience than some of the more recent Zelda games like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and very much mimics in kind of style the remake of Link's Awakening that came back in about 2018 or 2019, I think it was. And in fact, this Echoes of Wisdom is made by that same team, Grezzo, I think. And the main similarity that you can see between them is the art style and the graphical style, which is really, really interesting. It's got a kind of a diorama, sort of toy box feel to it, which I really like. The characters, they almost feel like little claymation versions of classic Legend of Zelda characters. You know, it's obviously got Zelda in it, and it's got Link in it. And this game really breaks a lot of new ground for the series, because this allows you to play as Zelda as the main character for the very first time. Link is still in the story. It takes a little bit of a backseat. And in fact, you have to rescue him, and that is one of the narrative threads that you follow. In what is a very simple narrative, I would say. There are these rifts that have been opening up all over the land of Hyrule and swallowing the people, and you've got to kind of figure out why these rifts are being created with the help of your little friend, Tri, and he's a little kind of, fairy in that kind of Navi style. Not as annoying as Navi, though, because he was really annoying, or she, they were really annoying, whatever they were. And the main hook of this game is, because she's Zelda, she doesn't fight really with a sword and a shield. That's not her main method of combat. Instead, she fights with these things called echoes, and echoes are basically copies of things that you can find in the game world. Now, some of those things are enemies. Basically, every enemy has an echo that you can summon to attack other enemies, but also things like beds and boulders and pots and all sorts of things which you can use to solve puzzles in a really relatively open-ended kind of way. It's not like there are dozens of solutions to each of these puzzles, but there is a kind of free-form approach to how you engage with the world and the puzzles, and it's really, really interesting the way you combine different echoes. Like there is a meat echo, for example, that you can use to distract some of the enemies. They'll go after and eat the meat, and then you can kind of sneak up and attack them, which I think is really neat. And there are a couple of other little bits and pieces like that. You can summon the echo of a bed, for example, and if you sleep on the bed out in wherever you are in the world, then you'll gain a bit of health back, and you have to just kind of lie on the bed, which is a really neat kind of recovery mechanic. As I say, it's not as expansive a game as Tears of the Kingdom or Breath of the Wild, but the world is big, especially bigger than the Link's Awakening remake from a few years ago. And actually, it takes that classic kind of Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past version of Hyrule, and keeps kind of that core. Some of those locations and even layouts are the same, which just expands the world to include some of these newer areas that you're exploring. So there's an element of familiarity there, which I really like. It's also a bit of a mashup of different kind of Zelda styles and characters. So in terms of the UI and the menus and all the dialogue boxes and all that sort of thing, it's very similar to Tears of the Kingdom and Breath in the Wild that way. But in other ways, it's very similar. It has characters that appear in Ocarina of Time, for example. The character design of the Gorons, the creatures that live in the mountain, very much reminiscent of Ocarina of Time. Whereas the Zoras, there's two kinds of Zoras, and the sea Zoras, they kind of look like Ocarina of Time ones, but then the river ones, river Zoras look like they do in a game like A Link to the Past, which is really interesting. There's even a couple of like the King of Hyrule looks like he does in the Wind Waker. So there's a bit of a timeless element. It's kind of blending all these elements of these different kind of timelines and characters together. The timeline of Zelda is something that fans argue a lot about. Not that it matters too much. I don't think Nintendo care too much about it, but it's nice to see it pulling all these different references. In case you can't tell from the way I'm speaking about it, I really enjoyed this game. In terms of things that maybe didn't jive with me so much, the UI and the way you select the echoes is not great. It's basically this big kind of wide list that just keeps on building. There's over like 100 echoes or something in this game. And you just have to keep scrolling back and forth to find the ones that you want. There are ways in which you can sort them very basically, like in terms like a cost or how often you use them, when you last found them, that kind of thing. But there should have been a better way. Maybe you could shortcut some of the ones that you use more often than not. That really was a bit of a gripe I had with the game. The game looks really good graphically. The Switch, at the tail end of its lifespan now, still able to impress in the handheld format. And the frame rate though does chug a bit at times, and that's something that I hope when the Switch 2 comes out, that some of these games that do struggle a little bit performance-wise will get a bit of a boost when you play them on the Switch 2, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about hopefully that from Nintendo. Um, I just really enjoyed this game. It was interesting playing as Zelda with a different spin on the formula. She does have like a sword fighter mode, but it's limited by an energy gauge, so you can't just turn into the sword fighter mode and play the game like that. It's something that you have to replenish and that you can expand so that you can use it more. So if you're really struggling with combat, there is that to help you out, makes things a little bit easier. And I think ultimately this was a great experience. I think I completed it in about 25 hours, and I had as much fun in that 25 hours as I had in the 100 or so hours that I had in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and allows you to kind of play around with the world a little bit, much like Tears of the Kingdom does. This is a really interesting direction the Zelda series has taken, but also with the traditional dungeon structure, which people do miss from those more recent games. And you go in them, solve the puzzles, find the map, find the compass, and beat the boss. That very traditional Zelda structure does make a return here, and I like that as well. It's kind of a best of both worlds of the traditional Zelda and more modern Zelda. So I'm glad I went back to it. I'm glad I cleared it off the backlog and cleared it off my list of Zelda games that I need to play the whole series. So if you haven't checked it out, I recommend that you do. And if you have played it, let me know in the comments. If anyone's watching, to comment. Let me know if you enjoyed it and if you had any different opinions to what I had. Let's have a bit of a discussion. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you on the next one, whenever that's going to be. Bye.